Matt today. If you can mute your microphones, and then if you've got a question, if you can look at the chat box at the bottom, and then we'll get to you. I would encourage everyone to ask as many questions and to give Matt a harder time as we possibly can. And the more interactive it is, I think generally the more we collectively get from these sessions. So let me introduce you to Matt. And Matt, thank you very much for your time. And can you firstly introduce yourself and a little bit about your background, please?
Sure, Andy, thanks very much. Good morning, I should say good afternoon now, everybody. My name is Matt White. I've worked in the order-to-cash software space. I was just thinking the other day as part of this introduction for let's leave it this and say in excess of 20 years. So in that time, I've worked on green screens and keying data into applications, to writing applications, to helping develop them, install them, train on and sell them. So I've seen a lot of changes in that time, and I'm sure some of most of you participants on the call today will have seen the same sort of thing from when you first started out in that journey. For my sins prior to that, I was a practicing solicitor in commercial debt recovery, both in Australia and the UK, and one of those sort of poachers turned gamekeeper scenarios where I got approached by a vendor to come and help develop their system. So that's how I got to where I am today. I put a caveat around most of the things that I'm going to present to you, in so much that some of those are my opinions, obviously, and there's, to Andy's point, we want to have as much interaction as possible. So please feel free to jump in, interject at any stage, or if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them within the best of my ability.
Okay, thanks for that. If you just remind yourself, this session is very much about how technology and automation in the accounting space has changed since the pandemic. So what we have got is that Matt was kind enough to put together a presentation. This is a very broad subject, and it's a very detailed subject. So whilst we have a presentation, I think the idea being is that we'll focus some of those key areas where there is, if you like, an immediate need, or it can create a toolbox for the credit control manager. And again, if there's a particular area on technology, Matt is a very, very experienced guy. If there's any particular questions that you've got around this area, then again, even though that Matt may not touch on it, then please feel free. So Matt, over to you, please.
Thanks very much, Andy. So let me first start by sharing my screen, then making sure that everybody can see it. Is that a yes?
Yep. We can see that, yeah.
Okay. That's fantastic. Let me see, I can make sure I can click through it. Right, there we go. Now, I apologise for the lengthy agenda, but to Lynn's point, we may not get through all of this. Some of this might be deemed as off topic, but just want to set a little bit of background, understand, the question that Atul posed to me, was like, thanks very much, Atul. It was like along the lines of, Matt, would you like to give a presentation? Yes, okay, let's find as broad a subject as possible, and then, try and pin you down on a few points. So these are some of the things as a result of some of the research in that sort of accounting and order cash space that I've done over the course of the last sort of month to 6 weeks. So some of these will be on point, some of these may not be, as to Andy's point, closer to what you do into your day-to-day operations. So let's try and put a bit of framework around that, and so this is my first caveat, is that, in relation to how has that changed in the accounting space, but more importantly, what has artificial intelligence and automation done to that space? So I suppose the first thing we can say, and there's lots of reports, some of those reports, anything that's pretty much pre-pandemic, you can most probably, put in that basket of being obsolete, because the world's been tipped on its head as a result of, what's happened with the pandemic and how we've all actually changed our working practices and our working ways, that some of those trends that we may have seen pre-pandemic most probably been superseded or accelerated past those. So the caveat I put around that is most of the research that I've sort of extrapolated on or expanded on is most probably reports that I've found over the course of the last sort of 2 years, for want of a better word. So that's the first step. The second one is let's try and grab some of that terminology. People bandy about all these terms, and we look at them and we have that expectation that everybody knows what we're talking about, and you're sitting there in that room going well, I don't really know what RPA is, Matt. And when I first started out on that journey, and someone said to me, where RPA comes from is actually, if you want to just strip it back, and this is most probably showing my age now, if we think about it in the Excel world, it's like a macro. It's like a series of keystrokes that you've automated that you want, historically has been done by a person, is now being done by the computer. So where RPA actually grew out of was offshore shared service out centers, or BPOs. So historically, they would have people that would key information into the system. So the managers in those roles were saying, well, I can get some software that can automate that keystroke. So that's I always use that as an example of what RPA is. It's sort of automating some keystrokes that you would normally get. So where does that apply in my audited cash world or something? If I'm logging onto a website, I can have a bot, an RPA, do that for me. I don't have to log in and extract the same pieces of information all the time. I can have a robotic process automation do that for me. And then, as I said, all these terms get bandied about, but what we want to do is make sure that we understand the differentiation between those. So to Andy's point, automating is, how can I, automate some of those tasks? Whereas digitization is, how do I make that analog information digital, I should say. And I said the most thing to take out of that is they are two separate things. I'm automating a whole series of processes. So what are the processes that I need to do to automate? And therefore, remove elements of human intervention where I can. Digitizing is taking some analog information and converting it into a digital form, so I can create a digital footprint, so I can actually start tracking the journey of that workflow, of that transaction through the system. So these are just, again, terminology, trying to bring those out so that if anyone has any questions about what they are and what they meant to do, these were just some definitions that I worked through. So the next thing I was sort of taking up, because we're talking about the pandemic, was understanding. I came across an article by the British Medical Journal, and they were talking about things like telemedics and saying how great are telemedics because of the things that they can do. So now I can have just as we're having here, I can have a face-to-face with my doctor without having to go to his surgery. Now that's a great thing, because there's a lot of people that may not be able to do that. They can't get out of their home because of some sort of incapacity, but they need to see their doctor. Now I can do that via a Zoom call, or I can talk through my symptoms with a doctor, just as we're doing here. He can prescribe some medication for me. That's a great thing. That's maybe save the elderly having to travel, having to get to and from the destination. But what they call out in that article is the flip side of that. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that now, is that as a result of the pandemic, so we don't make sure these benefits that we have gained aren't to a detriment of the society. So what they're talking about there is saying, if I had historically, I might have been running a doctor's surgery, but in that doctor's surgery, I might have been employing 3 or 4 cleaners on an app. Pre-pandemic, I had 3 or 4 cleaners. Now, either my surgery is shrunk in size, or it's not as busy as it once was. So I'm now employing only 1 or 2 cleaners. So, what is the impact on my labour market as a result of technology? So understanding that journey from its inception to its conclusion, on where it impacts us, in the market, and then what we need to do to address that. And so you'll see this term that sort of jumps out, this concept of what they call augmented intelligence, because it's a mixture of human and machine intelligence. So mixing those two things together to provide the best for the world going forward. So this is meant to be busy, because here's another example of all those acronyms and those, terminology that gets bounced around by, let's say the people in the know or senior management. And I'm sitting there going like, oh, okay, I don't really know what, Fed now stands for, or, this, or request to pay stands for, or whatever it might be. So I'll sit there quietly, for fear of either being exposed from what I do or don't know, rather than maybe asking those questions. And I know historically during my career, I've sat there and asked the same questions. So some of this terminology, maybe for front and center for what you do on a daily basis. Others will be new to you. And all I've done here is pick some of those out, to Andy's point, that talk about how they may impact us on that sort of accounting / order to cash world. And the message that seemed to emanate from, at least from the research I did, was this concept of real-time payments. So for us in the order to cash world, we're on the receivable side, but what we're really doing is we're chasing payments. So if I can make it easier for my customers in the B2B or the B2C world to pay me whichever way they want to, surely that's got to be a good thing. So when we look at these, when we're talking about accounting and we've got that two sides of the same coin, the AP side and the AR side, one begets the other. If I can make it easier for my customers, whether they're B2B or B2C, to pay me rather than Andy or Lynn, if say we're three different businesses, surely that's got to be a good thing. So this again is just a whole bunch of that terminology. I'm not going to go through any of those, but Andy, I'm just going to maybe stop and catch my breath and see if there's any questions at this stage, or if you're quite happy for me to move on. I'll just hand that back to you for a minute.
Yeah, thanks, Fleckwis. I've got a couple of questions really. The first one is when we look at technology and the inevitable implementation of technology in the months and years to come, is there any type of technology or software that will introduce efficiency that's relevant and today? So in other words, what's out there today to help a credit control department be more efficient, collect debt quicker, and assess debtor risk? So is there technology available today that maybe we should look at?
Yeah, look, Andy, yeah, absolutely. And I think there's two things. First of all, everywhere you look, people are going to talk about digitization and your digital transformation, right? And that is such an encompassing statement that it covers all aspects of your interaction with your customers, whether they're B2B or B2C. From my research, what I found out, or what sort of jumped out to me, was this, and we'll look at it in a little bit more detail, is this framework that's been implemented by the government in and around request to pay. And the beauty about that is that today that can sit by or next to your current collection processes. So it's not a matter of rip and replace. It can augment those. You can actually channel those jointly. So you can actually, if you're sending out invoices to your customers, you don't have to change that. But you could, if you wanted to, for example, embed your invoices in the request to pay framework. You say, well, what does that mean, Matt? Why is that better than what I'm doing at the moment? And we'll come on to that in a little bit more detail later. Again, it's that request to pay. It's digitizing your transactions or your interactions between you and your customer. And that's something that, it would be a digitization project in its own right. It would be something that related to order to cash. Its impact on the business is that it creates for you via open banking the ability to get paid even quicker. You say, well, how is that, Matt? And we'll look at that in a little bit more detail. It's provided you have that interaction and it's up and running and you've done that authentication, you've got the ability via request to pay to take your money directly from your customer's bank account if they've provided you with that approval in real time. So if I've got Andy on the hook, got him on the phone, and I say to him, hey, Andy, I'm going to send you an authentication, which is going to ask for a request to pay. Andy authenticates that. I've still got him on the phone. I can take the money out of his account whilst we're still speaking on the phone. So I think, to your point, Andy, I think that'd be one that if I was going to take something away from today, that would be the first thing that I'd be looking at. And there's a few others that we'll look at in a little bit more detail.
Brilliant. Just touch on that open banking. Open banking, I hear a lot about open banking and the benefits of open banking, but how many companies actually use it? I mean, it seems a great tool to me, but. Well,
I think there's a couple of components for it. The first component of open banking is within the UK, but let's talk specifically there, is those banks that have signed up to it. Right, so you need your banks to sign up to the open banking protocol first. And I think on last count, there was somewhere between 18 or 20. So unfortunately, just by sheer circumstance, my bank isn't part of the open banking network, So what you'll find is a lot of, maybe, what we call, the high street banks. But there's more and more of those startup banks that are coming online with. So what the open banking protocol is a whole series of APIs, application programming interfaces, that let my bank via machine readable language talk to your bank without any human intervention, and provide a series of prompts and requests that allows you then to, with a right approval, once you've provided that approval, Andy, is automatically take money out of your bank from a request from my bank. Or vice versa.
And how, if I was a customer, a debtor, how would I generally feel about that? I like to manage my own cash flow. Maybe I don't like the idea that my suppliers can go into my bank account, even though I authorize it to get payment. So
yeah, and we'll great question. We'll come on to that. So within that request to pay, which is a component of open banking, is that you have the ability to, delay the payment, make a promise to pay, reject the payment. You don't have to accept it. You can say, well, I will make that payment. I will let you take that payment from my bank account, Matt, says Andy, but actually you can't take it today. You can take it on Friday because it's the first of the month and I know I'll get paid. Okay. So you can go back and say, yep, you can take that money, but you can't take it till the first. And then what will happen on the first, as long as provided you give me that authority, it'll just take the money on the first.
Perfect.
So the real challenge there will be where I can see some, and I'll come on to a little bit more detail. So where I can see those challenges will be around potentially in the B2B space, right? Because the biggest competitor for B2B and technology is what's happening in B2C. So whatever happens in B2C, what I can do in my personal life and on my phone, why can't I do that in my business life? What's stopping me from doing that? And that usually then it's in many of those cases, it's it's not when I say a two-way transaction interaction, it can be a multi-way transaction interaction. So there's Andy, he's waiting for Lynn to pay him so that he in turn can pay me. But what happens is Lynn forgets to pay him on Friday, and then I go and make a request to take his payment out, and Lynn's money that was due to come in hasn't come in, and then I go and take money out of Andy's account and it's not there. That's just trying to put it into layman's terms, in a better way. So there can be some of the challenges that I could see maybe, playing out. But there'll be, and that'll be the challenge. How do we work around that? How do we make that, and that the request to pay framework, is looking at ways of, how do we address those types of scenarios that I just talked through there,
Okay, is it fair to say then, Matt, that request to pay, an important open banking technology, those subscribe to it, it's still being developed in some sense. There's not all the banks doing it, but it's something that's inevitable, will probably come.
Look, I think it's quite interesting. So request to pay or open banking is not new. It came 2017, 2018, it came out, but we've all been consumed by the pandemic for the last 2 years. So these things have been bubbling along under the surface. And now as we come out of the pandemic, they're surfacing up again, So it's like, so it's not, it's not bleeding edge. It's been something that's been, talked about for a number of years. And I think what's happened now is now that the economy is starting to open up and we've gone through all of these contactless interactions with ourselves, whether it's, tap via our phone or via our credit card. And we've seen, the disappearance of cash, either as a good thing or potentially as a bad thing for some of those, technology deprived customers that are still in the economy that, ideally, work from a cash environment. So, you see, I don't know about you guys, but you'll go around and you'll see, some chemists or some shops on the high street, they'll say, cash still accepted on premises. You think, well, hang on a minute. We've gone full circle where, maybe that was the primary, historically may have been the primary method of transacting, to being it completely obliterated for those people that then are the more vulnerable that may not have access to those lines of credit, and live in that, cash to cash, week to week transaction, So I think, we can charge ahead with technology, but we need to make sure in a lot of those instances that we don't leave too many of, fortunately or unfortunately, what we would deem as the vulnerable behind in that process.
And I think we'll move on, and perhaps later on, if there's anyone who's attending the event has looked at open banking or looked at technology and they're willing to share some of their thoughts, that'd be great as well. So back to you, Matt.
Thanks, mate. Right, so that's a great lead into the next question. So this was, ideally we'd do this in a poll question, but in relation to the first two rules, here's the question, they're a little bit self-explanatory. Who made those remarks? Bill Gates. So it really doesn't matter about the technology to a certain extent, because if you haven't got your processes clearly and well defined and knowing what you expect them to do, then all you're going to do, as to his second rule, is you're going to magnify the inefficiency. So if you haven't, before you commence your digital journey or your digital transformation or whatever it might be, is that those second parts in relation to transformation still require the human intervention or the human interaction, the people that have got the vision. Where do I need to get to? I want to have, 80% of my customers transacting with me digitally by 2025. Okay, what's the strategy to get us there? I can make a bold visionary statement like that, and who's the team and who are the people that are going to help me get there? So I can then say, right, I've made these big statements. Then the last point is, how do I execute against those? How do I have a team that helps me get to 2025 where I've hit that 80% digital interaction? So again, these rules will still apply. It really doesn't matter what the technology is. It doesn't matter, maybe if we're back in the accounting sector, those types of things. And you'll see a lot of those things now that, that HMRC do, they do open banking, so, when you're due to pay your tax, whether it might be your VAT, they have the ability now, provided you've given the authority, for example, to take money directly out of your bank account. Great for them because they're getting money into the government coffers quicker, those types of things, so that they can then report on the efficiency of that around their vision and their strategy of executing. You hear about the government's digital transformation. You see that all the time with HMRC, for example. And the concept of that is, what about those digital transformations that are being done, deemed as a disaster or a failure now? Those projects, like any other project, but they've got digital attached to the front of it. Why is it that they've failed? And you usually find that they've failed as a result of those last 3 points. It's that they haven't executed correctly on their strategies or their visions to get there. So this is just a little bit of, again, lots of information out there. Was most probably too much, so I'm not going to dwell on these things because I'm conscious of the time. Is that this is really to that question. What has the COVID-19 done in relation to digitization? So across the globe, it's accelerated those digital transformation journeys, and they're across the board, right? So when we say customer interactions, they can be anything. So that can be buying online, paying online, interacting via chatbots to customer service, whatever they might be. This is just a snapshot of what was happening sort of pre-pandemic. You can see back in 2017, 2018, to what happened during, the preceding, 2 to 3 years in relation to the uplift of, those digital customer interactions. So,
Matt, just on that last question, is that more B2C or B2B?
No, it's just customer interactions, right? So that was what I was saying. It's not specific in relation to a breakdown between those two sectors in regards to this. Is just digital customer interactions. But great question, Andy. Thanks. Okay. So let me come back and say, let's look at our cohorts. Let's look at the people that we're servicing. Who are those people? And again, this is this information is like, so it's it's this group, the younger generation, or the generation coming into the workforce, that feel that they're most impacted as a result of the pandemic. Is it because compared to the silent cohort that may or may not have lived through the war and that may have lived through this is the first sort of global impact that's hit that cohort. So they're the ones that feel most impacted by it. So they're the ones in theory that are going to be ideally more reactive to it. So, you hear them getting mentioned by another name sometimes. I'm just going to leave it at that. But it's, understanding, do they feel that they're the worst hard or most hard done by? Why is that? Why is that? Is it because they actually physically can't interact, which is a natural human thing, with their cohort group because they weren't allowed to interact? Or is it now that they just do it all digitally and it doesn't make any difference anyway, irrespective of whether it's work or personally related as well? So looking at those millennials, again, this is just some information, and you'll get a copy of this deck anyway, but I don't want to, I'm not going to read through these slides, but the things that jumps out are, within the next 7 years, they're going to make up the best part of 72 to 75% of the, of the workforce. So they are the ones in that B2B space, moving into B2B or moving into the economy, that are going to have an expectation that what they can do on their phone today, they can do anywhere and any time. And you've seen those reports, and I think the copy of that is in the biography here about, how many times a day do they look at their phones, what it is that they're looking at their phone. There's a blurred distinction between their social looking at their phone and their business looking at their phone, but they're looking at the phone all the time. And why is it that the phone's most important? Is because it's via apps, it's the piece of technology that's most accessible, and affordable to the global population, as going forward. So it's understanding that, I know there was a great story that Atom Bank did, that they started providing services in Africa all via their mobile banking app, so that for them it was a greenfield site. There is no Atom Bank on the high street. There is no, high street in some of these countries, but they were able to capture customers by providing to them, a facility or an application that would allow those customers to bank online. So as we get to that stage of, if I've got 91% of the people in the world that have a smartphone or a feature phone, that's going to be the tool that they're going to interact with. So, if it's, tap on phone technology or wearable technology, they're the things that I'm doing in my B2C world that I'm going to expect again in my B2B world.
Good.
And then
right, before you go on to the next slide, we have a question. Should we, meaning those in the credit control industry, be fearful of advancement in technology and the effect it could have on being human?
Well, the last one I can't really talk to. Look, I think it's always the case. It's, look, I think the first thing is technology has been in place, well, for the best part of all my working career, so except the technology when I first started out was green screens, and dumb terminals, and big servers, and, really showing my age here, big servers that were in air-conditioned sections of the office because they generated that much heat that they would, blow up, and you'd most probably replace them with tape reels and those types of things. So I think the first question is that technology, but that hasn't necessarily seen a reduction in force. I think it's seen, that it's given options to people. I think it's how we embrace that technology, Andy, and how we use that technology to better then position both ourselves personally and professionally within the business. You want to be the person that ideally, brings the next change of technology to the table. I do this, I can tap my phone and, I can send a request to Andy, Lynn, and whoever it might be that says, you all owe me £30 for our dinner last night, accept to approve it, the money comes straight out. Job done. I can do that in my personal life. Why can't I do it in my professional life?
And then just lead on to that. You hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I had a bit of echo noise there. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. If you lead on to that, I see technology as more of a journey for a company. At some point, you've got to start the journey. You've got to think about the strategy, and it's going to implement over a period of time. But when I talk to larger companies, they're very aware of the need of technology and transformation and digitalization. But that takes a lot of investment in resources and investment. Is the same true, and is it important that smaller companies should also look at this, or is this technology really only available at the moment to the larger corps?
No. Great question, but no, I don't think so. I mean, look, the first thing is you hear more of the larger corps, right, doing that sort of stuff, right? But let's talk in the SMB world. There is a swathe of vendors that provide services, that will link to, for example, your Sage accounting package, your Xero accounting package, that will provide, those APIs in and out of those tools, that will allow you to perform exactly the same types of, digital transformation that we talk about, or that we see more at a larger scale. We mightn't get the budget, and it may not be a huge journey, but there is, and I can more than happy to take this offline and provide whoever asks a list of vendors in that space that allow their customers in the SMB space or SME space to get paid immediately. They'll take where the question is, where do they make their money? They're going to take a percentage cut on some of that transaction cost. But for you as the small SME, if I'm getting my money in within 3 days rather than 10 or 30 days, what's the value of that? What's the value of that to my business? So no, that's a great question, but I think the beauty about technology is that it's actually been able to push downstream into that mid-market sector, or into that SMB sector, that all of those things that we talk about and we bandy about are actually available, across the board.
Thank you.
So I apologise, I jumped a little bit ahead, and we'll come on to this in a little bit later. Is the infamous buy now, pay later. It must probably show my age now. I mean, I think it used to be called a lay-by, but the goods used to still remain in the shop. The difference now is that obviously it's going to get shipped to you. But what this is really sort of trying to highlight here is, the Gen Zers or the millennials of the world, we can't dictate, how they have to pay us. We have to accept the ways that they want to pay us. What is the way that they want to pay us? So if we look at something like, Amazon and the just walk out, we could say that's the trust economy, right? Because if you think about it, that's what crypto or Bitcoin is. It's a trust economy, right? Because you're trusting the transaction, right? So I've taken that to the next step and saying, okay, I'm going to get my shopping basket and I'm going to walk around the shop. I'm going to pull all of my goods into that shopping basket. You see various elements of that with, you can scan things as you go, and then I just walk out, and they have a whole series of touch points. Now, I can do that with my self-checkout, because I'm still checking out, but I'm now on their camera when I'm doing my checkout. There's no one checking my basket. If I want to check 3 items out and I walk out with 6, that might be down to me. My things might buzz or they may not. But you say, what's the impact of that? Well, the impact of that is, maybe I don't have store security anymore. So this goes back to that question that, was asked by the British Medical Association. What impact are these types of things going to have on our economy overall? But, the emergence of that, just walk out, method is that you've got my details, and maybe what the pandemic has most probably done, again, either rightly or wrongly, is that the government has captured that much more information about us than historically they may never have done, whether it's via, NHS apps or COVID apps or those types of things. And this whole question around, what, the sharing of my data. I was chatting to a small SMB the other day, and he said, he uses Xero, and he said, I'm quite happy they can have as much information. I've got nothing to hide. They can have as much information as I want, because if it makes it easy for me to get paid, I'm more than happy to do it. I don't have to worry about chasing payment on that, because I know that via request to pay, I'm going to get paid on the 3rd of April, because Lynn came back to me and said, I can't pay you on the 1st, but I'll pay you on the 3rd. That's fine. That's going to happen. So I think there's a mind shift in the way that people want to interact and want to get paid, and they want to, they want to remove as many transactions or transactional interactions as, they may have done previously. We see that now with, apps that we get, when we go to restaurants or when we go to the pub, we can order everything to table. So there's less transactions that are taking place in our private life. The things are just brought to the table. They've got our details. They've recorded our payment card. I walk out of the restaurant or the pub. They've recorded all that detail. The payment just goes through. So there's less interactions with me and, say, the person behind the counter or behind the bar.
Thank you.
So I think this is important because I think it's still relevant, right? So what I mean by that is we always know it's got to be the right person. That hasn't changed. Where it has changed, I think, is what we would see in the B2B and the B2G space. So what I mean by that is that those organisations now are driving us as the AP team to their portals, right? You can only interact with Government X in Moldova if you, lodge an electronic invoice into their portal. If you don't do that, you can't interact with them, full stop. So that's, as you think about it, is the machine readable form going back to the same machine readable form. So that's my B2G space. The same with my B2B. I don't ring up AP anymore because AP, there's no AP department at that because they're all working from home. It's harder for me to contact them. But what they're saying to me is that, you don't need to ring AP and understand when you need to get paid. You need to go onto our portal and you'll be able to track where your invoice is. So there is an impact in accounts. We all talk about order to cash and the AR team. What's happening on the AP side? Because what's really happening is those customers are making our AR teams their de facto AP teams for their customers. You need to go on and track the status of your invoice. Where is it? So, and then, again, we talk about the message. If I'm going onto a portal, there is going to be no message that I'm going to send because I'm just making a request to see when I'm going to get paid and what information comes back from my RPA process that tells me where that invoice is. Did it make the portal, yes or no? Great, I know it made it. Has it been approved or rejected, yes or no? If it's been rejected, why? What do I need to do? If it's been approved, great, when am I going to get paid? Now, I can find that all out via a digital interaction back to that portal. Yeah. But in my B2C world, that's going to be a little bit different, So the message that I started to send now, and if we're talking about things like customer vulnerability and what that looks like in today's world, I'm conscious of time, Lynn, too. So we might need to truck on a bit, Andy. But what is it that what sort of message do I need to be disseminating to if I'm a utility provider, and I'm chasing someone for payment? What message do I need to be interacting with them to do that? And that moves to the sort of right time. When do I need to send that message? Again, if I'm sending to a portal, it doesn't matter because I'm not interacting with any person. But if I'm reacting with a person, if it's in say an SMB, I might want to send that message digitally to Matt White's restaurant on a Monday night because I know on a Monday night he's not open and that's the night he does his books. So there's more likelihood that he's going to pay me on a Monday night when he's doing his accounts in Xero or wherever it might be, that if I deliver a message to him on his phone or on some other device that's asking him for a payment, there's more likelihood he's going to pay me on a Monday night. I think the last one there is the right channel. And we've been talking about that, is how do you want to interact with those people? What channel do you want to use to get that?
Perfect, Matt. This is, as I said before, such a broad subject. We could sit here and then for hours. And I think you've agreed that a copy of these decks can go out to those attendees. So any questions they have on the remainder of the slides, then I'm sure they'll reach out to you. What I'd like to do, if possible, the next 10, 15 minutes is trying to engage and trying to have an interaction and some discussion. Because we always learn from each other. So if anyone's got any questions or any experience or are looking at or have implemented some sort of digital solution and are willing to share their experiences, that will be great. So just if I kick the questions rolling, when I look at technology, when I talk to our clients, it is all about efficiency. Yeah, it's all about the customer experience, but ultimately that investment it needs a return on investment. And when I talk to companies, it's all about, can I introduce efficiency and technology that ultimately improves the client experience, but can actually make more money? So when someone's looking at whether to invest, what are the key factors? Is it customer experience? Is it efficiency? Or is it ultimately profit?
Oh, yeah, that's a great. Look, this is just my opinion, right? I think it's twofold. So let's call them soft and hard benefits. Yeah. So our hard benefits are, our ROI. Are we going to make more money? Are we going to get money through the door quicker? If we're going to do that via automation and digitization, that's a great thing. But I think, if we step back a bit and said, if I said to Andy or Lynn, 5 or 10 years ago, I'm the CX officer for organization Y, they'd be saying, well, what's a CX officer? And that's so you can see that, there's been a rise of, the customer experience, right? Not only as a journey, but having somebody responsible for that. So if I can make my customer experience, I love working with, Andy.co, because it's a really frictionless journey. It's really good. And the net effect of that is, well, if I'm getting to the stage where someone's coming on my portal, for example, and they're making some payments and they're paying off some outstanding invoices, that's going to automatically trigger for our automation an improvement in maybe they were on hold, or their credit limit was X, but they've now made all these payments. That means that their credit limit is Y. But because I've been capturing information about their payment, their buying and their payment behaviors, I can then surface up to them, all of the offers that are available for this week, this month, that may be relevant to them. I just don't want to bombard them with every single offer I've got on the table, but I know that, Matt White's a plumber and he always buys, caulking glue or whatever it might be. As a result of him making that interaction or transaction with me, and his credit limit has now improved, I can make an offer to him. And because I've captured him, I've got him engaged, I've got him on my website, there's more likelihood that he's going to buy whilst he's there. So, hopefully that's an example of, trying to see both sides of that. Look, there's no doubt that there is an efficiency drive, but I think what we're also seeing as a result, and we all hear about supply chain, right? And, cost of petrol, supply chain. And if you think about it, historically, there's been a lot of those BPOs or, offshoring. I think we're going to see an emergence of nearshoring or onshoring, because we got those organizations, again, if they're driven by profit, they're going to want to make those supply chains and journeys shorter, because it's going to be less of an impact on fuel. How do you do that? How do you make that shorter? Well, the way you do that is by, I can implement automation and digitization that allows me to bring previously maybe what was an offshore service back to an onshore or a nearshore service. But that's just my view. I could be completely wrong, but they're some of the things we see.
Can I just ask, Matt? I mean, when we first had the pandemic, we really thought working from home, I really can't get to do everything I need to do easily. Managing teams wasn't easy. And then as the time went on, we actually found we'd done quite a bit more. And so we became more automated because we had to, not because we were kicked screaming into it. I just wondered if there was a show of hands, how many people have changed their mind about automation, having been forced to work from home in a business sense? So your reaction to a hand raise, be grateful for that, and we'll see how many of the people on this call have seen that they believe automation is much more workable. Yeah, that's great. And might I just ask, Tracy, is there something in particular you would say has been beneficial since you've been working from home as far as automation is concerned?
Yeah, it's the thing about just opening your eyes about what you can and can't necessarily do in the office. I mean, a prime example for the company I'm with is credit cards. We have a desktop credit card terminal, and when we were all working from home, nobody could put a transaction through it because we weren't in the office. So we're now moving to a system where we can all do it remotely from our homes. And also for our colleagues over in Europe as well, we can just log onto the website, key it in, job done.
Absolutely with you, Tracy. We were the handheld terminal, the little PDQ, and we suddenly thought, oh, this isn't the answer anymore. And we now have the portal. Amazing how much easier it is. So yeah, completely there with you. Thanks for your comment.
Just an idea, Matt, is for those that may be interested in exploring this subject a bit more, and unfortunately we didn't have enough time to go through your presentation in full. Just thinking on the top of my head, for those that may be interested, we may be able to set up a workshop, if you're agreeable to that, Matt, where maybe we can just get together in London and just talk about case studies, just talk about this subject for those attendees that may want a bit more information, and maybe explore this in a bit more detail. So this is here to stay. Yeah, technology, digitalization, efficiency is going to be part of credit management, increasingly in part of credit in years to come. And I said before, it's a journey, and those who want to start to explore some of these options, there may be some form of workshop, maybe an idea. So those who may be interested in that, if they can let Lynn or myself know, and if Matt is agreeable, maybe we can set up a workshop, for a couple of hours somewhere in London.
I'm more than happy to do that, Andy. I think it's a massive topic, and it's like trying to chunk that down into bite-sized pieces that everyone can get something or take something away from it. To Lynn's last point, I think that's really interesting. So we have all this emotional intelligence in the office, and of course now they're all working remotely. So if you're new into the business, how are you going to learn that? How are you going to understand or learn those company learnings, and as this slide alludes to, if that knowledge set resides in that age bracket, 40 to 55 or whatever it might be, and they're people that are working from home, how are they going to disseminate information to the next generation? How are they going to be actually able to learn those idiosyncrasies, not only of the industry, but how your business works? You usually learn that via your at desk or side of desk or water cooler conversations, whichever terminology resides with the audience most appropriately. May
I just ask, Ian McPherson, did you have a comment to make? I see your hand is raised. Technology changed for you?
Yeah, well, it's changed for our clients, Lynn. I'm in the sort of debt recovery business, so I'm seeing it from sort of maybe how technology is actually improved. It's identified weaknesses a lot quicker. By technology. I think that's what I've seen from our perspective. Our clients are identifying late payment quicker. It's helping them to deal with volume a lot quicker. It's helping them to be more efficient in getting the payments in. As Andy was saying. So that was just all I wanted to comment on.
No, that's excellent. Thank you. And Steve Walsh, I see your hand was up.
That's right, Lynn. Yeah, I mean, we've been doing a lot of work around kind of automation in terms of potentially introducing bots into the business. So that's not yet done, but we're also looking at a variety of other things. So I've got to say there's some real good ideas that I've got out of this session. So been particularly useful.
Oh, you can pass your thanks on to Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. Well done, Matt.
So there are questions at the moment, Matt, so I'll hand back to you to wrap up.
Oh, okay. Well, go on, Andy. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, just one question. For those cynics out there who say, look, I've always done it this way. Yeah, the human touch. What would you say to them to encourage them to give a long, hard look at technology at some level. And that's the consequences of not embracing technology over the next 5 years.
Oh, look, I think that's twofold. I think, first of all, there is always going to be an element of, let's call, your customer base or your ledger that is going to require or appreciate that human touch, right? So the trick is not to lose that. But, but as I was saying, as that next generation comes through that, that don't want to speak on their phones, and that won't answer their phones, but they might want to do that digitally, then they'll be quite happy to receive a WhatsApp message requesting a payment, or an embedded link requesting a payment, so they can just click on it and scan it with their phone, and they don't want to talk to us. Now that poses a different question, I think. But I think, and that's what, things like, if you think about all those people that are working from home, right? And I'll guarantee 90% on these people on this call say, because everyone talks about their organization's productivity going up despite the fact that their employees are working from home. So what does that tell us, right? So what it tells us is that we obviously don't need to measure our staff by the fact they're in the office from 9 to 5. It's what they're doing in that 9 to 5, right? But if we're able to digitize that and capture it, which will be ideally a lot easier with technology, we're actually going to be able to track and measure the things that work as much as the things that don't work. What is it that does or doesn't work? Do I need to be, if I've got some vulnerable customers, with that horrible challenge of, heat versus eat, for example, right? Maybe all the suppliers are contacting them at the start of the month, and they're just, they don't know who to pay and their way out of that. But maybe if I'm then a utility supplier that contacts that customer mid-month, 2 weeks in advance of that payment being due, and maybe contacting, them in association maybe with a debt agency, a customer that can help them through that. Maybe we come to them with a solution rather than just saying, well, I need your money or I'm going to cut you off. Now, I know that we've all moved on from those days because we're going to have to, and we're going to see, as all these price hikes going forward, that that's because the people haven't got the money, they haven't got the money, right? But it's coming through that on the other side. That organisation was fantastic to work with. They listened to me. They worked out a plan with me. We worked out a solution because they'll be the customers that you retain. And I think that's the real journey, I think, Andy, is that, understanding of, what we need to do above and beyond just pure, order to cash executives or credit executives. You always say that, in the industry, we've got fingers in every pie. We know what's happening in sales. We know what's happening in payments and receivables and treasury and those types of things. They won't change, but we'll build up, build up ingestion of more of that, tacit knowledge, and be able to share that back into the business.
Brilliant. Is there any more questions from anyone?
If I can just say, we will be putting a little write-up onto our East of England LinkedIn page. So please feel free to put any questions forward to Matt. I'm sure he'll pop in and out of the branch CICM LinkedIn, and we can hook you guys up.
More than happy wherever I can, and that, so not a problem at all.
Brilliant. Leaves us to say, Matt, thank you very much, and thank you for condensing a quite difficult subject in an hour. Just to remind someone, the video will be on the CICM YouTube. A copy of the decks, we called it presentation, will be available for those who want a copy. And anyone that's interested in maybe this workshop where we explore and discuss this in more detail, then please let Lynn or myself know. And obviously thank all of you for attending, because I know you're all busy, and hopefully you felt as though it was worth your investment in time. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye now. Cheers.
Thank you all. Yes. Bye-bye.